Michael Carter sat in his small one-bedroom apartment in Denver, staring at the empty coffee cup in his hand. Life hadn't gone the way he expected. Just a year ago, he was supposed to be married to Emily, the woman he thought was his forever. But Emily had left him for someone more stable, a man with money, a man who could give her the life she said she deserved. Michael had loved her with everything he had, but it wasn't enough. Now, he lived quietly, working long shifts at a mechanic's garage, avoiding parties, weddings, and anything that reminded him of what he had lost. One rainy evening, Michael was driving home when he noticed a young woman sitting by the side of the road. She wore a torn jacket, her hair damp from the rain, her eyes tired but strangely determined. A small cardboard sign sat next to her, hungry but hopeful. Michael slowed down, debating whether to stop. His heart said yes, but his mind warned him not to get involved. Yet, something about her eyes made him pull over. "Hey," Michael said softly, rolling down his window. "Do you need a ride? Or maybe something to eat?" The woman looked at him carefully, as if trying to decide if he was safe. Then she gave a faint smile. "My name's Sarah," she whispered. "And food would be nice." Michael nodded and opened the passenger door. As she got in, the smell of rain and coldness followed her. He drove to a nearby diner, bought her a warm meal, and sat across from her as she ate like she hadn't eaten in days. "You don't owe me anything," Michael told her when she kept thanking him. I know what it feels like to be left out in the cold." Sarah paused, her fork in the air. "You've been there too, huh?" Michael looked away, his throat tightening. "More than I'd like to admit." The two strangers sat in silence for a while, the sound of rain tapping against the diner's windows. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them could name. But as they left the diner, Michael's phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It read, "Michael, it's Emily. I'm getting married this weekend. I wanted you to know, and I hope you'll come." Michael froze, staring at the glowing screen, his chest tightening. Sarah noticed the change in his face. "Bad news?" she asked softly. Michael's lips trembled as he whispered, "My ex-fiancée, she's getting married." And in that moment, a strange thought crossed his mind, one that would change everything. Michael sat in his car with Sarah beside him, staring at the glowing text message on his phone. His chest tightened as if the words were knives, slicing open wounds he thought had healed. Emily. The woman he once dreamed of marrying. The woman who had promised him forever. The woman who had broken that promise without hesitation. And now she wanted him to come to her wedding? Sarah, sitting quietly in the passenger seat, studied his expression. She didn't know him well. He was just a kind stranger who had given her food and a warm seat in the rain, but she recognized pain when she saw it. Her own life had been full of it. "Michael," she asked softly, breaking the silence. "You don't have to answer if it hurts. But, are you okay?" Michael exhaled, gripping the steering wheel. His knuckles turned white. "She's getting married this weekend," he muttered. "Emily. The woman I was supposed to marry." Sarah blinked. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then she leaned back in the seat, whispering almost to herself, "That must feel like losing everything twice." Michael glanced at her, surprised by how accurately she captured the ache in his chest. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like." The car filled with silence again, only the sound of rain on the windshield. Finally, Sarah asked, "Are you going to go?" Michael let out a bitter laugh. "Why would I? To watch her marry someone else? To remind myself of what I lost?" He shook his head. "No. That would be torture." But even as he said it, a strange thought returned to his mind, the thought that had flickered when he first read Emily's message. He turned to Sarah. His eyes softened. "Can I ask you something strange?" Sarah tilted her head. "Depends how strange." Michael hesitated. His voice came out low, almost embarrassed. "Would you come with me to the wedding?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Me? To her wedding?" Michael ran a hand over his face, embarrassed by his own idea. "I know it sounds crazy, but maybe it would make it easier if I didn't walk in there alone. Maybe it would." I don't know, help me face it. Sarah looked at him, searching his face for sincerity. For a long moment, she didn't answer. She wasn't used to being invited anywhere, let alone something as fancy as a wedding. She had been invisible for so long, people walked past her on the streets, eyes averted, as if she didn't exist. And now, this man she barely knew was asking her to stand beside him at the most painful, personal event of his life. Michael, she said quietly, her voice trembling, I don't even have proper clothes. Look at me. I'm nobody. Michael's eyes softened, his voice steady. You're not nobody. You're the only one who sat here tonight and actually listened to me. That's more than I can say for most people in my life. Sarah's lips parted, surprised by his kindness. She wanted to refuse, to tell him he was making a mistake. But something inside her whispered that maybe this invitation wasn't just about him. Maybe, just maybe, it was about her too. After a long pause, she whispered, if you're serious, then yes. I'll go. Michael's chest loosened. He hadn't realized how much he needed her answer until now. He gave her a faint, grateful smile. Thank you, Sarah. Really. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like she mattered. She wasn't just a homeless woman sitting on a cold street. She was someone's choice. As Michael drove her to a small motel where she could sleep safely for the night, Sarah looked out the window, her reflection staring back at her. 1,000 thoughts rushed through her mind. Why had she said yes? Why was her chest pounding like this? And most of all, what was going to happen when they walked into that wedding together? Michael didn't know either. But deep inside, he felt it. This wasn't just about facing Emily. It was the beginning of something bigger, something he couldn't yet name. But fate had its own plans. Because while Michael and Sarah were planning to walk into Emily's wedding together, Emily herself had already heard a rumor about Michael. And that rumor was about to change everything. The next morning, Michael sat at his kitchen table, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of him. His mind was restless. He had invited a stranger, Sarah, a homeless woman, to his ex-fiancée's wedding. The decision had felt right in the moment, but now the weight of it pressed heavily on his chest. What would Emily think? What would her family say? Michael rubbed his temples. What am I doing? He muttered under his breath. But before doubt could drown him completely, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Emily, it was his best friend, Daniel. Hey, man, Daniel said on the other end of the line. I heard something strange. Is it true you're going to Emily's wedding? Michael stiffened. How did you? Daniel cut him off. Word gets around fast. Emily told a few people she sent you an invite. But now there's this rumor going around that you're bringing someone with you. Is that true? Michael hesitated. His voice came out firm. Yeah, I am. Daniel sighed heavily. Mike, listen. You sure that's a good idea? People are already talking. Emily's new fiancé, David, isn't exactly thrilled. I heard he thinks you're trying to show her up. Michael's jaw tightened. Show her up. I'm not trying to play games, Daniel. I don't want to walk in there alone. There was a long pause before Daniel answered. All right, man. Just be careful. That wedding isn't gonna be easy for you. When the call ended, Michael leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He knew Daniel was right. Walking into that wedding meant stepping into a storm. But for some reason, he wasn't as afraid as he thought he'd be. Maybe it was because Sarah would be beside him. Meanwhile, across town, Emily stood in front of a mirror in a bridal boutique, her white dress draped perfectly around her. She looked beautiful, radiant even, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Her best friend, Rachel, adjusted the veil and teased, "You're glowing, Em. But what's with that face? Cold feet already?" Emily forced a laugh. No, it's not that. She bit her lip before confessing, I invited Michael. I thought it would give me closure. But now I hear he's bringing someone. Rachel raised a brow. Someone? Like who? Emily shook her head. I don't know. But people are saying it's his new girlfriend. Rachel smirked. Well, maybe it is. Why does it bother you? Emily's cheeks flushed. It doesn't bother me. I didn't expect it. Michael was always safe, predictable. He wasn't the type to surprise me. Rachel chuckled. Maybe he's not the same Michael you knew. Emily turned back to the mirror, her reflection staring at her with questions she couldn't answer. Why did it sting so much, the thought of Michael moving on? She was about to marry David, the man who gave her everything she thought she wanted. So why did her heart feel unsettled? That evening, Michael met Sarah at the small motel. She had washed up, and though her clothes were still worn, there was a light in her eyes he hadn't seen before. You ready for this? Michael asked as they walked toward his car. Sarah gave a nervous laugh. Ready as I'll ever be. But, Michael, are you sure you want me there? I don't want to embarrass you. Michael stopped, turning to face her. His voice was steady, sincere. Sarah, if anyone should be embarrassed, it's not you. You're doing me a favor by coming. You're giving me the strength to face this. For the first time in years, Sarah felt a sense of belonging. She wasn't being pitied. She was being chosen. She smiled faintly. Then, I'll stand by you. Michael nodded. A strange warmth filled his chest. But neither of them knew that trouble was already brewing. Because at that very moment, David, the groom, was meeting with a friend at a bar. His voice was sharp, his jaw clenched. Michael's coming to my wedding with some girl, David muttered. I don't know who she is, but I don't like it. He's not going to walk in there and ruin my day. The friend chuckled. What are you gonna do? Kick him out? David's eyes hardened. If he steps out of line, I'll make sure he regrets it. The night before the wedding, Michael lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling. Memories of Emily flooded his mind, the way she used to laugh, the way she used to say forever. Beside those memories, a new image appeared, Sarah's tired but hopeful eyes, her promise to stand by him. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. All he knew was this, he wasn't going alone. But tomorrow, when Michael and Sarah walked into that wedding, they would be walking straight into a storm that neither of them was prepared for. The morning sun stretched across Denver, warm and golden, but Michael didn't feel its comfort. He stood in front of his small mirror, adjusting the tie he hadn't worn in months. His reflection looked older, wearier, yet there was something steadier in his eyes, a quiet determination. Today was the day. Emily's wedding. Michael had rehearsed it in his mind all night, how he would walk in, keep his composure, and leave quietly. But none of those rehearsals had prepared him for the gnawing ache in his stomach, or the weight pressing down on his chest. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it, and there stood Sarah. She was wearing a simple navy blue dress, one Michael had bought for her the day before at a thrift store. It wasn't expensive, but it fit her beautifully, highlighting a quiet grace she didn't even know she had. Her hair, once messy and unkempt, was now brushed neatly, falling softly against her shoulders. Michael's breath caught for a moment. Wow, he said softly. You look amazing. Sarah's cheeks flushed. You're just being kind. No, Michael shook his head, his voice firm. I mean it. For the first time in years, Sarah stood a little taller. Nobody had ever looked at her that way, not as a burden, not as a stranger, but as someone worth noticing. Michael offered his arm, and she hesitated before looping hers through his. Together, they walked out the door, toward a day neither of them could predict. The wedding venue was breathtaking, a grand hall decorated with white roses, crystal chandeliers, and polished floors that gleamed under the lights. Guests in elegant suits and gowns filled the space, laughing and mingling. As Michael and Sarah entered, whispers began almost instantly. Is that Michael? Someone murmured. He actually came, another whispered. And he brought someone with him. Sarah's chest tightened. She could feel eyes on her, judging, questioning. She leaned closer to Michael and whispered, maybe this was a mistake. But Michael squeezed her hand gently. Don't listen to them. Just stay with me. His words steadied her. She lifted her chin slightly, trying to ignore the stares. Then, across the room, Emily appeared. She was radiant in her gown, every detail flawless. But when her eyes landed on Michael, and then on Sarah beside him, her smile faltered, just for a second. It was subtle, but Michael saw it. Emily quickly recovered, walking toward them with her new fiancé, David, at her side. "Michael," Emily greeted, her voice smooth, practiced. "You came." Michael nodded. "You invited me." Emily's eyes flicked briefly to Sarah. "And you brought someone." Michael glanced at Sarah, then back at Emily. His voice was calm but firm. "This is Sarah. A friend." Emily forced a polite smile. "It's nice to meet you, Sarah." But David wasn't as subtle. His jaw tightened as he looked Sarah up and down, his tone sharp. "Friend, huh? Interesting timing." Michael met his eyes. "She's with me. That's all you need to know." The air grew tense, the kind of silence that hums before a storm. Guests nearby pretended not to listen, but their ears leaned closer. Emily, sensing the tension, quickly interjected. "Well, I hope you both enjoy the ceremony." She slipped her arm through David's and guided him away. But as she walked, she glanced back at Michael one more time. Her eyes weren't filled with joy. They were filled with something else, something Sarah noticed immediately. The ceremony began, music swelling as Emily walked down the aisle. Everyone rose to their feet, admiring her beauty, her grace. Michael stood silently, his hands clenched, his heart heavy. Sarah watched him closely. She saw the pain flicker in his eyes as Emily exchanged vows with David, the kind of vows she had once promised to Michael. But beneath that pain, Sarah also saw something else, a quiet strength, the kind that only comes from surviving heartbreak. When the officiant finally declared, "You may kiss the bride," applause filled the room. Michael looked away, his chest burning. Sarah gently touched his arm, grounding him. He gave her a small, grateful smile. But just as the reception began and laughter filled the air, a sudden voice rang out. "Michael Carter." He turned to see an older woman, Emily's mother, approaching. Her eyes were sharp, disapproving, fixed not on him, but on Sarah. "You shouldn't have brought her here," she said coldly. "This is a family occasion, not a place for strangers." Sarah froze, her throat tightening, humiliation washing over her like cold water. Michael's jaw clenched, anger flashing in his eyes. He stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "With all due respect, Mrs. Thompson, Sarah is my guest. And she belongs here as much as anyone." Gasps rippled through the guests nearby. But before Sarah could even catch her breath, David walked up, his eyes dark with anger. He leaned close to Michael and whispered so only he could hear. "If you don't leave, I'll make sure she regrets ever stepping foot in here." Michael's heart pounded. He looked at Sarah, who stood trembling beside him. And in that moment, he realized, this wasn't just about Emily anymore. This was about protecting Sarah. Michael's blood boiled as David's words echoed in his ears. "If you don't leave, I'll make sure she regrets ever stepping foot in here." Michael's fists tightened at his sides. Every instinct screamed to fight back, but then he glanced at Sarah. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the small purse he had given her. She looked like she wanted to disappear. This wasn't about his pride. This was about her safety. Michael leaned closer to David, his voice low and steady. "If you try to hurt her in any way, you'll regret it. Not me." David smirked coldly. "We'll see." Then he walked away, slipping effortlessly into the crowd of guests, leaving Michael burning with anger. Sarah tugged gently at Michael's sleeve. "Maybe we should go," she whispered. Her voice shook, and her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I don't belong here. They're right." Michael turned to her, his voice firm but filled with emotion. "No, Sarah. They're wrong. You do belong here, because I want you here. You're my guest. You're not leaving just because they can't see your worth." Sarah's lips parted, stunned by his conviction. Nobody had ever defended her like that. Nobody had ever chosen her, especially not in front of a crowd of people waiting to judge. Her chest ached, but it wasn't from pain, It was from something unfamiliar, something dangerously close to hope. The reception continued, music filling the air, glasses clinking, guests laughing. But Michael and Sarah could feel the tension, a storm simmering just beneath the surface. They sat at a small table near the corner. Sarah fidgeted nervously, her eyes darting to the elegant women in their gowns, the men in polished suits. She felt out of place, like a shadow among stars. "Michael," she whispered, "look at them. Look at me. I don't fit here. I'm just some homeless girl you picked up on the street." Michael's heart clenched. He leaned closer, his voice soft but fierce. "Don't ever say that again. You're not just anything, Sarah. You're more than they'll ever see. You're stronger than all of them put together. You've survived things they couldn't even imagine." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Michael's voice cracked, raw with honesty. "Because once, I needed someone to remind me I was worth something. And no one did. I won't let that happen to you." Sarah swallowed hard, her chest tightening. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe she mattered. And maybe, just maybe, she did. But across the room, Emily's eyes followed them. She was supposed to be celebrating the happiest day of her life, yet her gaze kept returning to Michael and the woman beside him. Her new husband, David, noticed. His jaw tightened as he whispered harshly into her ear. "Why do you keep looking at him?" Emily flinched. "I'm not." "Yes, you are," David snapped. "You invited him here. And now he's here with some woman, making a scene. Was that your plan? To rub him in my face?" Emily's face paled. "David, no. I wanted closure." David scoffed. "Closure? Or regret?" Emily froze, guilt flashing in her eyes. David slammed his glass down and stormed away, leaving Emily trembling in the middle of the room. Guests turned, pretending not to notice, but whispers rippled like waves. Emily's smile faltered, but she forced herself to stand tall, her heart pounding. For the first time since the ceremony, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Meanwhile, Michael excused himself to step outside for some air. He needed space, a moment to breathe, to escape the suffocating tension inside. Sarah stayed at the table, sipping water nervously, trying not to draw attention. But attention found her anyway. A group of women in elegant dresses approached, their eyes sharp with judgment. One of them leaned down, her voice dripping with disdain. "So, you're Michael's date?" Sarah nodded timidly. "Yes." The woman laughed lightly, covering her mouth. "That's surprising. Where did he find you?" "At a shelter." The others giggled cruelly. Sarah's cheeks burned, her throat closing. She wanted to vanish. But before she could answer, a voice cut through the air. "Enough." It was Emily. The women froze as Emily stepped forward, her expression unreadable. She looked directly at Sarah, then at the women. "You don't get to speak to her that way. She's my guest's guest, and that means she's welcome here." The women exchanged uneasy glances, muttered excuses, and quickly walked away. Sarah sat frozen, her eyes wide. Emily turned back to her, her tone softer now. "I'm sorry," Emily said quietly. "They shouldn't have treated you like that." Sarah blinked, unsure how to respond. Why are you being kind to me?" Emily hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Michael outside. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "Because once, I wasn't." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, Emily straightened, masking her emotions, and walked away. Sarah sat in stunned silence, her heart pounding. What had Emily meant by that? And outside, Michael lit a cigarette he didn't even want, staring at the night sky, unaware that inside, his past and his present had just collided. The cool night air wrapped around Michael as he leaned against the stone railing outside the reception hall. The faint hum of music and laughter drifted through the walls, but out here, it was quiet. He flicked the cigarette between his fingers, unlit, just something to hold. His chest was tight, his mind heavy. Every corner of this day had been harder than he imagined. Behind him, the glass door slid open. He turned to see Sarah step outside, her navy blue dress catching the glow of the garden lights. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Michael forced a small smile. I should be asking you that. I heard those women earlier. Sarah looked down, her voice trembling. They were cruel, but Emily stopped them. She actually defended me. Michael's brows rose in surprise. Emily did. Sarah nodded. She told them I was welcome here. And then she said something strange. She said, because once, I wasn't. Michael froze, the words hitting him like a wave. Emily, admitting regret? That wasn't something he expected. He turned his gaze back to the night sky. Maybe she's not as happy as she wants everyone to believe. Sarah stepped closer. And what about you? Are you happy? Michael's throat tightened. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he whispered, I thought I'd be broken watching her marry someone else. But now, I'm just confused. Because every time I look at her, I don't feel what I used to. I don't feel the same. Sarah's heart skipped. She searched his face, wondering if she had heard him right. Michael turned to her, his eyes soft. And when I look at you, I feel something I can't explain. Sarah's breath caught, her cheeks flushing. Nobody had ever looked at her the way he did now, with gentleness, with sincerity, with hope. Before she could respond, the door slammed open. It was David. His face was red with anger, his steps heavy. He marched straight toward Michael, ignoring Sarah completely. Enough of this. David snapped. I see what's happening. You came here to stir things up, Michael. You couldn't stand to see Emily happy, so you brought some charity case to make a scene. Sarah flinched, the words slicing her like knives. Michael stepped forward, his voice low but fierce. Don't you dare talk about her like that. David sneered. Or what? You'll throw a punch. You think showing up here with her changes anything? Emily chose me, Michael. Not you. She never loved you the way she loves me. Michael's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a voice interrupted. David, stop. Emily had stepped outside, her face pale, her eyes flashing with anger. She looked at her new husband as if she was seeing him for the first time. You don't get to talk to Michael that way, Emily said firmly. And you definitely don't get to talk about her that way. David blinked, stunned. Emily, what are you? No, Emily cut him off. Her voice shook, but it carried strength. You think I don't see what you're doing? The threats, the anger. This isn't love, David. This is control. Gasps echoed from the doorway where a few guests had gathered, watching the scene unfold. Michael stood frozen, his chest pounding. Sarah's eyes darted between Emily and David, her heart racing. David's face darkened, his voice rising. Careful, Emily. Don't forget who you just married. But Emily didn't back down. Her eyes flicked briefly to Michael, then back to David. And in that look, Michael saw it, the truth she had been hiding all day. Regret. Pure, undeniable regret. Maybe I did forget, Emily whispered, her voice trembling but sharp. David's fists clenched, his anger boiling over. For a moment, Michael thought he might actually strike her. Michael's body tensed, ready to step in. But then, Sarah did something nobody expected. She stepped between Emily and David, her small frame shaking but her voice steady. You won't touch her. The crowd at the doorway gasped louder. David's eyes widened, stunned that she of all people had stood up to him. Michael's chest swelled with both fear and pride. He had seen Sarah at her lowest, broken and invisible to the world. But right now, she was radiant with courage. For a moment, nobody moved. The music inside had stopped. The night was silent except for the ragged breaths of the four of them standing in the garden. And then, David's lips curled into a dark smile. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. The garden lights flickered against the tense faces gathered outside. Sarah stood between Emily and David, her body trembling but her voice ringing in the cold night air. You won't touch her. For a moment, time froze. Even the music inside seemed to hush, as though the world itself was holding its breath. David's dark smile spread wider. Look at you, he sneered at Sarah. You think you're brave? You don't even belong here. You're nothing but. Don't. Michael's voice cut through like steel. He stepped forward, his eyes blazing, his jaw clenched. Don't you dare finish that sentence. David turned sharply to him. Or what? You'll embarrass yourself in front of everyone? You'll fight me at my wedding. By now, more guests had gathered in the doorway, whispers rippling through the crowd. Faces of family, friends, and strangers, all staring at the storm unraveling before them. Emily, her veil trembling in the breeze, took a shaky breath. David, stop this. Please. You're making it worse. I'm making it worse. David barked, pointing at Michael. He's the one who showed up here with her just to humiliate you. He couldn't let go, so he came crawling back. Michael's fists curled tighter. He could take the insult aimed at him, but not at Sarah. His voice shook with restrained fury. I didn't come here to ruin anything. I came because you sent me an invitation, Emily. You wanted me here. And Sarah. She's not just her. She's my friend. She's the only reason I even had the strength to walk into this place tonight. The crowd gasped. Sarah's eyes widened, her heart pounding. She looked at Michael, her throat tightening at his words. David scoffed, his voice dripping with venom. Pathetic. You couldn't handle losing Emily, so you dragged some broken little stray to stand next to you. That's not love, Michael, that's pity. Sarah flinched, the words cutting deeper than knives. For a moment, she felt her knees weaken, her old demons whispering that maybe David was right. Maybe she wasn't worthy of standing here. But then Michael's hand found hers. He gripped it tightly, grounding her, anchoring her. His voice thundered across the silence. Pity? No. What I feel for Sarah isn't pity. It's respect. It's trust. Something you clearly don't understand, David. The guests murmured louder now, their eyes darting between the groom and Michael. David's face twisted with rage. He lunged forward, shoving Michael hard in the chest. Michael stumbled back a step but held his ground, his eyes locked on David's. Don't touch me again, Michael warned, his voice low, dangerous. Emily rushed between them, her veil fluttering, tears brimming in her eyes. Stop it. Both of you. This is supposed to be my wedding day. But David wasn't listening. His pride, his ego, both cracked open in front of everyone. He sneered at Emily. You see, this is what happens when you invite him. He'll always come between us. Always. Emily's lips trembled. No, David, you're the one tearing this apart. Not him. David froze, disbelief flashing in his eyes. What did you just say? Emily's chest heaved, her voice breaking. I thought I was choosing the safer path. I thought marrying you would give me stability, comfort, everything Michael couldn't. But right now, all I see is anger. All I see is a man who can't even respect me on my wedding day. The whispers turned into gasps. Guests leaned closer, wide-eyed, stunned. Michael stood frozen, his chest tightening as he listened. Sarah clutched his hand tighter, sensing the storm about to erupt. David's face reddened. His voice dropped into a dark, dangerous tone. Emily, you're making a mistake. Emily shook her head, her tears spilling freely now. No, David. I already did. The crowd erupted, gasps, whispers, shock rippling through the elegant hall. David's eyes blazed with fury. He turned toward Michael, his fists clenched, his body trembling with rage. And before anyone could stop him, he lunged. Straight at Michael. The moment David lunged, everything blurred into chaos. Michael barely had time to brace himself before David's fist came swinging. It connected hard against Michael's jaw, sending him stumbling back against the stone railing. Gasps and cries filled the air as guests screamed and rushed forward, some trying to intervene, others frozen in shock. Sarah screamed, Michael, and darted toward him, but the crowd swelled between them. Michael steadied himself, the sting in his jaw sharp, but his eyes burned with a fire he hadn't felt in years. He didn't swing back immediately. He clenched his fists, his breath ragged, fighting the urge to strike. He wasn't here to start a brawl. He wasn't here for violence. But David wasn't finished. His face twisted with rage, he lunged again. This time Michael caught his arm, twisting it and shoving him back with controlled force. "I don't want to fight you, David," Michael spat, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "But if you keep coming, I will defend myself." The crowd grew louder, phones appearing in trembling hands, cameras capturing every second of the scandal exploding on what was supposed to be a perfect wedding day. Emily pushed through the crowd, her veil slipping from her head, tears staining her cheeks. "Stop it! Both of you!" she cried, her voice breaking. She reached for David, her hands trembling. "You're humiliating us in front of everyone." But David shook her off roughly, his eyes wild. "Us? You mean me? You invited him, Emily. You brought this on yourself." Michael's chest heaved, his jaw tight. He wanted to walk away, to leave this nightmare behind, but then his gaze found Sarah. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands clutched to her chest, her eyes wide and wet with tears. Not for herself, but for him. She wasn't afraid of David's violence. She was afraid of losing the only person who had treated her with kindness. Something inside Michael snapped. Not anger. Not pride. But clarity. He straightened, his voice cutting through the noise. "This ends now." David sneered, ready to lunge again, but Michael stepped closer, his voice carrying enough power to still the crowd. "You can hit me, insult me, call me whatever you want. But you don't get to threaten her. Ever." He pointed at Sarah, his eyes blazing. "She's worth more than every empty promise you've ever made." The crowd erupted in murmurs, shocked by his words. Sarah's lips trembled, tears spilling freely now. She had spent years believing she was worthless. And here was Michael, defending her in front of everyone, giving her a dignity she never thought she could claim. Emily's breath caught, her chest tightening. She looked between Michael and Sarah, and for the first time, she saw it clearly. Michael's love, the kind she had once craved, was shining, but it wasn't for her anymore. It was for Sarah. David's face darkened, the realization hitting him too. His pride shattered. His voice turned sharp, venomous. "You think anyone's going to believe that? You think anyone here doesn't see what she is? A homeless nobody." The words sliced through the night, hanging heavy in the air. Every guest fell silent. Every pair of eyes shifted to Sarah. Her heart pounded. Her legs trembled. She wanted to shrink away, to disappear into the shadows like she had done 1,000 times before. But something stopped her. Michael's hand, reaching for hers. His grip firm, steady, unshakable. Sarah lifted her eyes. She met David's glare, her voice trembling but strong. "Maybe I don't have what you have. Maybe I don't have money or a home or nice clothes. But I have something you'll never have, David." The crowd leaned in, breathless. Sarah's chin lifted, her voice clear now. "I have the courage to stand here, in front of all of you, and not be ashamed of who I am. Can you say the same?" A hush fell over the garden, the kind of silence that burns deeper than noise. David opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. His chest heaved, his pride unraveling in front of everyone. Emily's tears flowed freely now. Her gaze lingered on Sarah, then shifted to Michael, her lips parting as if to speak. But before she could say anything, David snapped. His hand reached for a glass from the nearby table. He gripped it so hard it shattered, shards cutting his palm. Blood dripped to the floor as he pointed the jagged base of the glass toward Michael. Gasps and screams filled the air. David's voice shook with rage. "If you don't leave right now, I swear I'll." And then, he lunged again. David's lunge was fast, reckless, and fueled by rage. The broken glass in his hand glistened under the garden lights as he swung wildly at Michael. Michael reacted on instinct. He grabbed David's wrist, twisting it hard. The glass slipped from David's hand, shattering against the stone floor with a sharp crack. Gasps and cries erupted from the crowd as shards scattered across the ground. For a tense moment, the two men struggled, locked in a desperate clash of strength and fury. Michael's face was set with determination, while David's eyes burned with pride and humiliation. "Let go!" David roared, trying to wrench free. "Not until you stop," Michael growled, his voice shaking with both anger and restraint. "This ends here, David. I'm not going to let you hurt anyone." Finally, Michael shoved him back with enough force that David stumbled, nearly falling into the decorative fountain behind him. The crowd gasped again, some guests stepping forward, others retreating in fear of getting caught in the chaos. Emily rushed forward, tears streaking her face. "David, please. Stop this. You're scaring everyone." But David wasn't hearing her. His pride was shattered, and his chest heaved with the kind of fury that blinded reason. "You think you've won, Michael," he spat, pointing a trembling finger. "You think showing up here with her makes you some kind of hero." Michael's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Sarah stepped forward. Her legs trembled, but her voice carried across the garden like a steady drum. "He didn't come here to be a hero," she said. "He came here because you invited him. And he brought me because he wasn't afraid of your judgment, or your whispers, or your cruelty. That's what makes him strong." The crowd turned their eyes to her, stunned. The woman they had mocked, the stranger they had whispered about, was standing tall, her voice steady, her presence undeniable. Sarah's chest rose and fell as she continued, her voice trembling but firm. "You look at me and you see someone broken. But what I see when I look at you, David, is someone even more broken. Someone who has everything, yet acts like he has nothing. Someone who's so afraid of losing control, he tries to destroy anyone who threatens his pride." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the breeze seemed to still, carrying only the sound of Sarah's shaking breath. David's face twisted, but before he could lash out again, Emily stepped between them. Her hands shook, but her voice cut like glass. "She's right." The words dropped like a stone in the middle of the crowd. All eyes turned to Emily, the bride, her white gown glowing under the lights. She looked at David, her voice breaking. "She's right, David. You've done nothing tonight but prove who you really are. And it's not the man I thought I was marrying." David froze, his chest heaving, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "Emily." "No," she interrupted, her tears spilling. "I've been lying to myself. I thought choosing you was the safe choice. I thought money and comfort would make me happy. But all I feel right now is fear. Fear of the man I just promised forever to." Whispers surged through the guests. Phones lifted higher, recording every second. Michael stood frozen, watching the woman he once loved crumble under the weight of her own choices. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel vengeance. He felt sadness. Emily turned, her eyes finding Michael's. For a moment, the noise faded, the crowd disappeared, and it was just the two of them. Her lips trembled. "I made a mistake, Michael. I let you go, and I chose him. And now I see what I lost." Michael's breath caught, his chest tightening with the words he had once longed to hear. But then he felt the warmth of Sarah's hand still in his, her trembling fingers gripping his like he was her anchor in the storm. He looked down at her, this woman who had nothing but had stood up against cruelty and pride, who had defended him without fear, who had reminded him of his worth when he had none. His heart shifted. Emily's tears fell as she whispered, "I still love you." The crowd gasped again. Sarah's hand slipped slightly from his, her chest aching, her mind spinning with confusion and pain. Michael's lips parted, his throat tight. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't prepared for it. And in the middle of it all, David's voice roared again, louder than ever, shaking with desperation. "No one here is leaving until I get what I deserve." David's voice thundered through the garden, silencing the whispers instantly. His face was flushed red, his fists trembling at his sides. "Do you all hear me?" he shouted, his voice cracking with rage. "No one leaves. Not until I get what I deserve." Some of the guests backed away nervously, while others clutched their children, fear flashing in their eyes. The fairy lights that had once seemed romantic now looked harsh and unwelcoming, casting long shadows across the tense scene. Emily, her veil half torn, shook her head with tears streaming down her cheeks. "David, stop this madness. Please, you're humiliating yourself, humiliating me, humiliating everything." But David only sneered, his pride wounded beyond repair. He turned to Michael, his voice dripping with venom. "She says she still loves you. You hear that? That means all of this, all my money, this wedding, everything, it's worth nothing compared to you. His laugh was bitter, cold. And you show up here with a stray from the street, thinking you're the better man. Sarah's breath hitched, her body stiffening at the cruel words. She lowered her eyes, the old shame pressing hard on her shoulders. For a second, she thought of turning, of running into the night where no one could see her tears. But Michael felt her hand twitch, and he tightened his grip, steady and unyielding. He looked straight at David, his voice firm. The difference between us, David, is that I don't measure worth in money or appearances. I see people for who they are. And Sarah, she has more courage and kindness in her than you'll ever understand. The crowd stirred again, whispers of agreement echoing in the silence. Some guests nodded subtly, their eyes shifting uncomfortably toward David. Emily wiped at her eyes, her voice trembling but clear. David, this is over. I can't marry you. Not like this. Not after tonight. Her words dropped like a stone in still water, sending ripples of shock through the guests. David's face went pale, his body stiffening. What did you just say? Emily's voice cracked, but she didn't back down. I said I can't marry you. I see who you are now, and it terrifies me. I won't live the rest of my life walking on eggshells around your temper. The whispers turned into gasps, people covering their mouths, some shaking their heads. David's pride shattered completely. His voice rose into a raw, desperate scream. You can't do this to me. Not here. Not in front of everyone. His chest heaved, his fists clenched. He looked like a man drowning in humiliation, grasping for anything to pull him back up. And then his eyes flicked toward Sarah. The crowd felt it instantly, the shift in his stare. A cold dread swept over the garden. He stepped forward, his voice low, dangerous. This is all because of her. She ruined everything. Michael moved instantly, pulling Sarah behind him. Don't you dare, David. But David wasn't listening. His pride, his ego, his rage, they had consumed him. He lunged again, this time not at Michael, but toward Sarah. Sarah froze, her breath caught in her chest. In that split second, the years of fear and shame flooded her mind, the nights she spent hiding in alleys, the times strangers looked at her like she was invisible, worthless. But now, facing David's fury, something inside her screamed louder than her fear. She raised her voice, strong and defiant. I'm not afraid of you. Her words rang out like thunder. Michael caught David by the shoulders, shoving him back so hard he crashed against the edge of the fountain. The crowd gasped again, some guests screaming. David stumbled, soaked from the splash of water, his tuxedo ruined, his dignity shredded. He sat there, glaring up at Michael and Sarah, his face twisted in defeat and rage. The silence stretched. No one dared move. And then Emily stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. It's over, David. David's lips trembled. His eyes darted from Emily to Michael, then to Sarah. His voice was a whisper, broken. No, this isn't how it ends. Not for me. He staggered to his feet, his expression dark and unreadable. Without another word, he stormed past the crowd, pushing through the doors of the hall and vanishing into the night. The guests stood frozen, stunned into silence. Michael's heart pounded. He turned to Sarah, his hand still holding hers. She was trembling, but her chin was lifted, her eyes wet with tears yet burning with strength. Emily looked at them both, her face pale, her hands trembling. She whispered, Michael, do you still love me? Michael's breath caught. The question hung heavy in the air, pulling at him with old memories, old feelings. He glanced at Sarah, then back at Emily. His heart was torn. The crowd leaned in, waiting for his answer. The night air was heavy, thick with the weight of everything that had just unfolded. Guests stood scattered across the garden, some whispering, some still recording on their phones, all of them waiting for the next words to fall. Emily's question lingered like a blade in the silence. Her eyes, red, wet, desperate, were locked on Michael. Do you still love me? She repeated, her voice breaking. Michael's chest tightened, his breath uneven. Memories rushed through him, late-night drives with Emily, shared laughter in small diners, the way she used to rest her head on his shoulder and talk about forever. She had been his world once. But as those memories flooded him, so did the sting of how it all ended. The message where she ended things, the coldness in her voice when she told him she needed someone better, someone with more. That wound had cut deep, and though it had scabbed over, it still ached when touched. Sarah stood only a step behind him, her hands clasped together, trembling. She didn't say a word. She didn't beg him to stay with her. She didn't even meet his eyes. She just stood quietly, silently bracing herself for the pain she feared was about to come. Michael looked at her. In Sarah's eyes, he didn't see the promises of yesterday or the regrets of what was lost. He saw resilience. He saw someone who had survived the harshest of storms and still found a way to smile, even if just faintly. The crowd shifted, the tension unbearable. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice low but steady. "Emily, I'll always care about you. I can't erase the years we had together. But love," he paused, searching for the right words. "Love isn't just about history. It's about who stands beside you when the world turns its back." Emily's lips trembled. "So, you don't?" Michael swallowed hard, his heart aching. "No. Not anymore." The words hit like a strike of lightning. The guests gasped softly, their whispers rippling through the garden. Emily's hand flew to her mouth as tears poured freely down her cheeks. She had expected hesitation, maybe even denial, but not the finality in his voice. Sarah's knees nearly buckled. She hadn't realized she had been holding her breath until that moment. Relief and disbelief flooded her chest, but along with it came guilt for being the reason a woman's heart was breaking in front of everyone. Emily shook her head, stepping closer. "Michael, please, don't say that. I made a mistake. I chose wrong. But we can fix it. We can start over." Her voice cracked on the last word, a plea more than a statement. Michael's jaw tightened. He looked at her, really looked at her, this woman he had once thought would be his forever. And then he looked at Sarah, her fragile frame cloaked in borrowed clothes, her eyes filled with uncertainty, yet standing there with more bravery than anyone else tonight. "I can't go back," Michael said softly. "Not when I've already found something real standing right next to me." The crowd erupted in whispers again, some shocked, some moved, others even wiping away tears. Emily's face crumpled. She shook her head, sobbing openly now. "You're choosing her over me." Michael's answer was quiet but firm. "Yes." For a long moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Sarah's eyes widened, her lips parting, unable to process what she'd just heard. A warmth spread through her chest, a mix of joy and fear, because being chosen also meant responsibility, and she wasn't sure she deserved it. Emily turned away, her sobs echoing through the silence. She staggered back toward the crowd, her gown dragging across the stone floor. Some of her bridesmaids rushed to her, wrapping their arms around her, guiding her back inside. Michael watched her go, his heart heavy. He hadn't wanted to hurt her. But deep down, he knew this was the truth she, and he, needed to face. The garden began to empty as guests followed Emily, the whispers continuing like waves. Soon, only a few remained lingering, glancing nervously at Michael and Sarah before slipping away. Finally, the two of them stood alone under the string lights, the broken glass still glinting on the ground, the echoes of chaos fading into the night. Sarah spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do that? Why did you choose me?" Michael turned to her, his eyes soft, his voice low. "Because when everything was falling apart, you stood by me. Because you see me, Sarah, not for what I lost, not for what I could be, but for who I am. And I see you, too." Her breath caught, tears pooling in her eyes. She had spent years believing she was invisible, nothing more than a shadow moving through alleys and forgotten streets. And now here was someone telling her she was seen. Truly seen. Michael reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His voice was gentle. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I don't know what we'll face. But I know this, tonight, you reminded me what real strength looks like. And I don't want to lose that." Sarah's lips trembled as a tear slipped down her cheek. For the first time in years, she smiled. A fragile, shaky smile, but real. And just when the moment felt still, almost peaceful, the sound of footsteps echoed across the stone floor. Michael turned sharply, his body tensing. From the shadows at the edge of the garden, David reappeared. His tuxedo was soaked, his face twisted, his eyes dark and unsteady. He wasn't finished. The sound of David's footsteps was slow, deliberate, echoing like thunder against the stone floor. Michael instinctively stepped in front of Sarah, his body tense, his jaw tight. Sarah clutched his sleeve, her breath shaky, every instinct inside her screaming danger. David emerged fully into the light. His tuxedo was drenched from the fountain, his tie torn loose, his hair plastered to his forehead. But it wasn't his appearance that sent a chill through the air, it was his eyes. They were bloodshot, burning with a dangerous mix of humiliation and rage. The crowd had mostly dispersed, but a few stragglers lingered near the doors, gasping as they saw him return. Someone whispered, "Oh no, his back," and hurried inside. David's voice was low, bitter. "You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone, and walk away like nothing happened?" He took another step closer, his fists clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. "No. I won't let this be the ending." Michael squared his shoulders. "David, enough. The wedding is over. Emily's made her choice. This night is done. Go home before you make things worse." David let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Worse? You think this is the worst I can do?" His voice cracked, sharp and unhinged. "You don't get it, do you? I had everything, Emily, the perfect life, respect, and you took it. Again." Sarah's pulse raced. She had never seen someone unravel like this, not in front of so many witnesses, not with so much venom in every word. Michael's voice dropped, calm but firm. "I didn't take anything. Emily saw the truth for herself. This isn't about me. This is about you." Those words seemed to slice David deeper than any punch could have. His face twisted, and for a moment he looked less like a man and more like someone cornered, trapped in his own shame. Then his gaze slid past Michael, to Sarah. His lip curled. "And you," he spat the word like venom. "You think you're some savior, don't you? Standing here in your borrowed dress, pretending you belong among people who laugh at you behind your back. You're nothing, and you always will be." Sarah's throat tightened, but she didn't lower her gaze this time. Her body shook, but she held her ground. Michael snapped, his voice like fire. "Don't you dare talk to her that way." David smirked, sensing the heat in Michael's words. "Ah, so she really does mean something to you. Pathetic. You threw away Emily, for this." He gestured at Sarah with disgust. "Everyone's going to remember this night as the night Michael chose a stray over a woman who loved him. Do you think they'll ever respect you again?" Michael stepped forward, his voice rising. "Respect isn't built on money, or weddings, or appearances. Respect comes from the truth. And the truth is, you don't love anyone but yourself, David." The silence that followed was sharp, heavy. Sarah's breath hitched as she watched David's face collapse into something darker, more desperate. Then, without warning, David rushed forward. Sarah screamed as Michael braced himself, catching David's charge. The two men struggled violently, fists flying, grunts filling the night air. Michael landed a punch that sent David staggering back, but David was too far gone, too consumed by rage to stop. He lunged again, knocking Michael into one of the garden tables. Plates shattered, glasses broke, chaos erupted once more. Sarah darted forward, her voice trembling. "Michael!" Michael forced himself up, wiping blood from his lip, his eyes locked on David. "This ends now," he roared. But David's laugh was hollow, chilling. "No, this ends when I say it ends." He reached into his soaked jacket pocket and pulled something out, metal glinting under the lights. Sarah froze, her blood turning cold. A knife. Guests who had lingered screamed and bolted back inside, shouting for security, for help. The garden emptied in a rush of panic, leaving only the three of them under the string lights. David held the knife steady, his chest heaving, his voice trembling with rage. "If I can't have Emily, if I can't have my perfect life, then neither of you will walk out of here happy." Michael instinctively moved in front of Sarah again, his arms spread, his voice strong. "Put it down, David. You don't want to do this." Sarah's tears blurred her vision, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct told her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She couldn't leave Michael. David took a step closer, the blade catching the light. His voice dropped to a whisper, chilling in its brokenness. "This is the only way." And then, he lunged. The world seemed to move in slow motion as David lunged forward, the knife glinting under the garden lights. Sarah's scream tore through the air. Michael reacted on instinct, shoving her back with one arm and stepping directly into David's path. The clash was brutal. Michael caught David's wrist, the blade inches from his chest. The two men struggled violently, grunting, their faces twisted with raw force. Michael pushed, David resisted, their bodies straining against each other. The knife trembled between them, neither giving an inch. "Drop it, David!" Michael roared, his voice full of desperation and fury. But David's eyes were wild, tears and sweat mixing on his face. "No. You ruined everything," he spat, his voice breaking. "I won't let you walk away like you've won." Sarah's hands trembled, her body frozen with terror. She wanted to rush in, to help, but the fear of that blade made her feet feel like stone. Yet the sight of Michael's face, straining, fighting to keep David from plunging the knife, shook her into motion. She darted forward, grabbing at David's arm with both hands. "Stop! Please, stop!" she cried, her voice cracking. David growled, jerking his arm violently, nearly knocking Sarah off balance. "Stay out of this." Michael's grip slipped for a split second, and the blade nicked his shoulder. He hissed in pain, but instead of letting go, he shoved harder, using every ounce of strength. The knife clattered to the stone floor, spinning out of reach. The moment it left David's hand, Michael slammed him backward against the fountain. The impact echoed, water splashing out onto the stone. David gasped, stunned, but his rage wasn't gone. He lunged again, fists swinging wildly now that the knife was gone. Michael took the hit to his jaw, staggering back. His lips split, blood trickling down his chin. Sarah screamed again, rushing to his side. "Michael!" she cried, clutching his arm. But Michael stepped forward again, pushing Sarah gently behind him. His eyes locked on David, his voice steady despite the chaos. "It's over, David. You've lost." David's chest heaved, his hair plastered to his forehead, his suit torn and soaked. His fists shook, but his eyes wavered for the first time. The fight had drained him, yet his pride refused to surrender. Then, from behind, a voice pierced the silence. "David!" Everyone froze. Emily stood at the garden doors, her veil gone, her makeup smeared with tears. Behind her were two security guards and several guests peering anxiously into the scene. Emily's voice trembled, but it carried a weight that silenced even David. "Look at yourself," she said, stepping closer. "This isn't love. This is madness." David's body stiffened, his breathing ragged. "Emily, I did this for us," he stammered, his voice suddenly small, broken. "No," Emily whispered, shaking her head. "You did this for yourself. You cared more about your pride than me, than anyone." Her words cut deeper than Michael's fists ever could. David's face crumpled, his body sagging against the fountain. For a moment, he looked like a lost child, stripped of everything he thought made him powerful. The guards moved forward cautiously, ready to restrain him. But David didn't resist. His eyes stayed locked on Emily, his lips trembling as he whispered, "Don't leave me." Emily's tears fell freely now, but her voice was steady. "You already lost me, David. Long before tonight." The guards took hold of him, guiding him away. David didn't fight them. He just stared at Emily, broken, as they led him into the shadows. The garden fell into a heavy silence. Only the soft trickle of the fountain and the distant murmurs of shaken guests remained. Michael exhaled shakily, his shoulder bleeding lightly from the cut. Sarah rushed to him, her hands fluttering over the wound. "You're hurt, oh my God, you're bleeding." Michael caught her trembling hands, holding them firmly. His voice was calm, despite the chaos. "I'm okay, Sarah. I'm okay because of you." Tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head. "No, you stepped in front of me. That knife, Michael, you could have," her voice broke. He brushed her cheek with his thumb, his touch gentle even as his own hand shook. "I'd do it again. 100 times. Because you matter." Sarah's breath caught, her chest heaving as her tears spilled freely. For years she had believed she was disposable, invisible, nothing. And here was someone telling her she mattered more than his own safety. Behind them, Emily watched quietly. Her heart ached, not with anger this time, but with a hollow, bittersweet ache. She had lost Michael, and now she saw clearly why. He was no longer hers, because his heart was already protecting someone else. Michael leaned closer to Sarah, his voice low, meant only for her. "You're not alone anymore. Not as long as I'm here." Sarah closed her eyes, sobbing softly, but in those sobs was something new, hope. The night had been chaos, heartbreak, violence. But in the middle of it all, something fragile and beautiful had been born. And yet, as the guards disappeared with David and the crowd slowly dispersed, Emily remained standing under the lights, her tearful eyes fixed on Michael and Sarah. She wasn't done. Not yet. The garden was nearly empty now. Broken glass sparkled under the lights, petals from crushed flowers floated in the fountain, and the night air hung heavy with everything that had just happened. Security had taken David away, shaken guests whispered in hushed tones as they drifted back inside, and the music that once filled the hall had long since faded into silence. Michael sat on the edge of a stone bench, his shirt stained with blood from the cut on his shoulder. Sarah knelt beside him, pressing napkins someone had handed her against the wound, her hands trembling. She was so close that Michael could see the tears clinging to her lashes. "You should go to the hospital," she whispered, her voice thick with worry. He gave her a tired smile. "It's not that deep. I'll live." But Sarah shook her head, frustrated. "You could have died, Michael. You put yourself between me and that knife without even thinking." Her lips trembled. "Why?" His eyes softened as he looked at her. "Because you're worth protecting." Her breath caught, her heart pounding. No one had ever said those words to her. Not once in her life. She turned her face away, tears slipping down her cheeks, too overwhelmed to speak. From across the garden, a figure approached slowly. Emily. Her gown was wrinkled, her hair loose, her makeup streaked from crying. She looked less like a bride and more like a ghost of the girl Michael once knew. Her eyes locked on the two of them, Michael, wounded but calm, and Sarah, kneeling beside him with tears in her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing. She just stood there, her breath uneven. Then finally, her voice broke the silence. "Can I talk to her?" Emily asked softly, her gaze on Sarah. Michael hesitated. His protective instinct flared immediately. He glanced at Sarah, silently asking if she was okay with it. Sarah swallowed hard, then gave a small nod. "It's okay," she whispered. Michael squeezed her hand gently, then rose from the bench. "I'll be close," he said firmly, before stepping a few paces away. He didn't go far, he couldn't, but he gave them space. Emily walked slowly towards Sarah, her heels clicking softly against the stone. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes red, her hands clasped together tightly in front of her. Sarah stood awkwardly, wiping at her wet cheeks, feeling suddenly small under Emily's gaze. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then Emily exhaled shakily. "I don't know what to say. Tonight has been a nightmare. But through all of it, I keep coming back to you." Sarah's brows furrowed, surprised. "Me?" Emily nodded, her lips trembling. "Yes. When I first saw you, standing next to Michael, I felt angry. Jealous. I thought you were just here to hurt me, to ruin my wedding. But then I watched you stand up to David. I watched you face him when no one else would. And I realized," her voice cracked, tears spilling, "I realized that you're braver than I've ever been." Sarah blinked, stunned. No one had ever called her brave. Not once. Emily stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I used to think Michael was mine forever. That no one could ever take his heart from me. But the way he looks at you," her words faltered, pain flickering in her eyes. "He never looked at me like that. Not even when we were happy." Sarah's throat tightened, guilt twisting in her stomach. "I never meant to take him from you," she whispered. "I didn't even think I was worthy of him." Emily let out a broken laugh, wiping at her tears. Maybe that's exactly why he chose you. Because you don't see his love as something owed, but as something precious. She paused, studying Sarah carefully. Do you love him? The question struck Sarah like lightning. Her lips parted, but no words came. Love. She hadn't even dared to name what she felt. But in her chest, in the way her heart raced when he looked at her, in the way she couldn't imagine her life without him anymore, the answer was clear, even if she couldn't say it aloud. Emily saw the silence, saw the way Sarah's eyes shimmered, and nodded slowly. You don't even have to say it. I can see it. Tears welled again in Emily's eyes. She took a shaky breath. Take care of him. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't let pride or fear take him from you. He deserves someone who won't run away when things get hard. Sarah's lips trembled, her own tears spilling again. I don't know if I can be everything he deserves. Emily stepped closer, her voice gentle. None of us ever can. But loving him, really loving him, is enough. More than enough. For a moment, the two women just stood there, tears in their eyes, bound not by rivalry but by something deeper, an understanding of what it meant to love the same man in different ways. Emily finally stepped back, glancing once more at Michael. Her voice was quiet, heavy with finality. Goodbye, Sarah. Sarah swallowed hard, whispering back, Goodbye, Emily. Emily turned and walked away, disappearing into the hall without looking back. Sarah stood frozen, her heart heavy with both guilt and hope. She wiped her eyes and turned to find Michael already watching her, his expression unreadable. He stepped closer, his voice low. What did she say? Sarah hesitated, then whispered, She told me to take care of you. Michael's chest tightened. He searched her face, the raw honesty in her eyes, the tears still clinging to her lashes. Something stirred deep inside him, a certainty he hadn't felt in years. But before he could speak, a loud voice broke the fragile moment. One of the guards rushed back into the garden, his face pale. David's gone, the guard said breathlessly. He escaped. Sarah's heart stopped. Michael's body went rigid. The night wasn't over. The guard's words cut through the garden like ice. David's gone. Michael's fists clenched instantly. His protective instinct roared to life, and he moved closer to Sarah without thinking. She felt the tension in his body, saw the way his jaw locked and the fear in her chest tightened. What do you mean he's gone? Michael's voice was sharp, commanding. The guard shifted nervously. We were escorting him to the front entrance, waiting for the police. He seemed calm, broken even. But then, he shoved one of us, bolted through the side gate, and disappeared into the street. We tried to chase him, but he was fast. Sarah's hands went cold. She gripped the edge of Michael's sleeve, her voice trembling. He could come back. He's not done. Michael turned to her, his hand gently covering hers. His voice softened, though his eyes burned with determination. I won't let him touch you, Sarah. Not ever again. But even as he said it, he felt the weight of the truth. David was unpredictable, desperate, dangerous. And now, out there somewhere in the dark, Emily reappeared in the doorway, her face pale. What's happening? I heard shouting. The guard spoke quickly. David escaped. Emily's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. No, he can't. She swayed slightly, grabbing the doorframe to steady herself. Michael turned to her. Emily, listen to me. You need to stay inside, surrounded by people. He's unstable, and I don't trust what he'll do next. Emily nodded shakily, though her eyes brimmed with fear. He'll come for me. I know he will. Sarah stepped closer, her voice quiet but steady. Or he'll come for Michael. He blames both of us. The three of them stood in heavy silence, the garden now eerily quiet, every sound amplified, the chirp of crickets, the distant hum of traffic, the faint splash of the fountain. Michael's mind raced. He had faced David once tonight, but the look in David's eyes haunted him. That kind of rage didn't just vanish. It grew. It twisted. The guard pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. I'll alert the police. We'll have patrols in the area. He won't get far. But Michael knew better. David was clever. When cornered, he'd find ways to slip through cracks no one else saw. He turned to Sarah, placing both hands on her shoulders. His gaze locked onto hers, steady and unflinching. "You're coming with me tonight. I'm not letting you out of my sight." Sarah's eyes widened. "Michael, I can't." "You can," he interrupted firmly. "David won't stop until he feels like he's won something back. And right now, the thing he wants most is to hurt us. To hurt you. I won't risk it." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. She hated being the reason for more danger, hated the thought of Michael bleeding again because of her. But the sincerity in his voice, the absolute certainty in his touch, broke through her fear. She nodded weakly. "Okay." Emily's voice wavered. "What about me? If he comes back here?" Michael turned, his tone firm but softer. "Emily, you're not alone. You have family here, friends, guards, and the police will be here soon. Sarah doesn't. She's the one most vulnerable if David finds her alone." Emily's face crumpled, torn between fear and the sting of hearing Michael's protective focus was no longer hers. But she nodded. "Just be careful," she whispered. Michael guided Sarah toward the exit, his arm around her protectively. As they walked, Sarah's heart pounded with conflicting emotions, terror of David, guilt for Emily, and something else too, something that scared her even more, the way she felt safe only when Michael was near. Outside, the night air was cooler, carrying the scent of rain on the horizon. Michael's car sat under a dim streetlight. He opened the passenger door for Sarah, his eyes scanning every shadow around them, every flicker of movement. "Get in," he said softly but firmly. Sarah slid into the seat, clutching her purse tightly, her hands trembling. She couldn't stop glancing around, half expecting David to appear from the darkness with that same broken fury in his eyes. Michael climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. Sarah watched him silently for a long moment before whispering, "Michael, what if he finds us?" He glanced at her, his voice steady, almost fierce. "Then he'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, he won't." Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes again. She turned to the window, watching the city lights blur as they drove. For the first time in years, someone was willing to fight for her. To bleed for her. But in the distance, hidden in the shadows of a narrow alley, a pair of eyes watched their car pass by. Eyes burning with rage. David hadn't gone far. And he wasn't done. The city streets were unusually quiet for a Saturday night. The streetlights flickered in places, their glow stretching shadows across the pavement. Michael's car rolled steadily through the darkness, every turn of the wheel deliberate, his eyes darting between the road and the mirrors. Sarah sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the hem of her dress. She tried to steady her breathing, but her chest rose and fell too quickly. Every passing figure on the sidewalk, every car that pulled up behind them made her heart leap. "Relax," Michael said gently, glancing at her. His voice carried calmness, though his own tension was obvious in the tightness of his jaw. "I won't let him touch you. Not now, not ever." Sarah's eyes flickered to him, tears forming again. "You keep saying that, but what if you can't stop him next time?" Her voice cracked. "He had a knife, Michael. If he'd been just a little stronger." "Stop," Michael cut in, his voice firm but not unkind. He reached over and covered her trembling hand with his. "Don't think about what could have happened. Think about this moment. You're here. You're safe. And I'm not going anywhere." She blinked at his hand over hers, warmth flooding through her even in the middle of her fear. Slowly, she nodded, though her chest still ached with unease. Unbeknownst to them, not far behind, a shadow followed. David had slipped through the alleys until he found the street where Michael's car turned. He'd stolen a dark jacket from somewhere, his tuxedo now hidden beneath it, his hair damp from sweat and rain. His eyes never left the glowing taillights of Michael's car. From the safety of the shadows, he muttered to himself, his voice hoarse. "You think you won tonight? You think you took everything from me? No, Michael. No, Sarah. You don't get a happy ending." His fists tightened as he followed at a distance, like a predator tracking prey. Michael pulled into his apartment complex, a quiet building tucked away from the main roads. He parked near the entrance, scanning the lot before turning off the engine. "We're here," he said softly. Sarah hesitated, her eyes wide as she looked around the dimly lit lot. "Are you sure it's safe?" Michael nodded. "Safer than anywhere else right now. Inside, the doors are locked, the windows secure. I'll be right there with you." He got out, circled the car, and opened her door. Sarah stepped out, clutching her purse tightly, her heels clicking against the concrete. She stayed close to Michael as they walked toward the building, his arm brushing against hers, his presence grounding her shaky steps. But across the street, hidden behind a row of parked cars, David crouched, watching. His chest heaved, his eyes burning with obsession. He whispered through clenched teeth, "Run to your safe little cage. I'll tear it apart." Inside the apartment, Sarah immediately sank onto the couch, her body trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline. Michael fetched a first aid kit from the bathroom, sitting down beside her to clean the cut on his shoulder. She reached out instinctively. "Let me," she said softly. Michael hesitated, then handed her the supplies. Her hands were still shaky, but she pressed the cloth gently against his wound, dabbing away the dried blood. He winced slightly but didn't pull away. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Sarah felt her chest tighten in a way she couldn't put into words. "You shouldn't have gotten hurt because of me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Michael shook his head. "I'd rather bleed than see you hurt. Don't ever think this is your fault." Her throat closed, and she had to look away to stop the tears from spilling. But deep down, a warmth stirred in her, a feeling she hadn't let herself believe in for years. Safety. Belonging. Michael leaned back, watching her carefully. "You're shaking. You should rest. I'll keep watch tonight." Sarah's eyes widened. "What about you?" "I'll be fine. I've stayed awake through worse." He gave a faint smile. "You've been through enough tonight. You need sleep." She wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in her bones was too heavy. Slowly, she nodded, curling up on one end of the couch. Michael draped a blanket over her, his touch lingering for just a second on her shoulder. Within minutes, her breathing slowed, though every so often she twitched in her sleep, whispering unintelligible words as if the nightmare was still chasing her. Michael sat in the armchair across from her, his eyes fixed on the front door, every muscle tense. His thoughts swirled, Emily's broken expression, David's madness, Sarah's trembling hands. He couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was just the beginning. And he was right. Because outside, hidden in the shadows of the complex, David stood silently, staring up at Michael's window. His lips curved into a sinister smile as the first drops of rain began to fall. "I'll make you regret this, Michael," he whispered into the storm. "And when I'm done, she'll wish she never met you." The rain poured harder, masking his presence as he disappeared into the night. Rain hammered against the apartment windows, steady and relentless, as though the night itself wanted to wash away the chaos. Sarah stirred on the couch, tangled in the blanket, her face twisted in restless dreams. She mumbled Michael's name once, her voice so faint it nearly broke him. Michael sat nearby in the armchair, wide awake, his eyes burning from the strain of staying alert. Every creak of the building, every whistle of the wind through the cracks made his muscles tense. He couldn't shake the memory of David's eyes, the look of a man who had nothing left to lose. He checked his phone. 3:17 a.m. hours crawled by like days. Sarah whimpered softly, pulling the blanket tighter. Michael moved quietly, kneeling by her side. He brushed a damp strand of hair from her forehead, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe here." Her body relaxed a little, her breathing steadying. But outside, in the parking lot below, a figure moved through the shadows. David. He stood under a broken streetlight, rain drenching him, his jacket plastered to his skin. His eyes stayed fixed on the glowing window of Michael's apartment. He didn't move for a long time, only stared, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. In his hand, he gripped something small and sharp, a shard of glass he'd pocketed from the shattered garden table earlier that night. "Sleeping soundly, are you?" he muttered under the storm. "You think you're safe. But I see you. I see everything." The next morning, Sarah woke to the smell of coffee. Her body was sore, her mind heavy with fractured memories of the night before. She sat up slowly, blinking in the soft daylight spilling through the blinds. Michael stood in the kitchen, shirt changed, his wounded shoulder wrapped neatly with a bandage. He poured 2 mugs of coffee, his movements steady but quiet. "You should have let me help last night," Sarah said, her voice groggy. Michael turned, offering her a tired smile. "You needed rest more than I needed patching up. Besides," he set the mug on the table near her, "taking care of you was more important." Her cheeks warmed as she wrapped her hands around the mug. "I don't deserve that kind of kindness." Michael sat across from her, leaning forward. "You do. You just don't believe it yet." The words made her chest ache in a way she couldn't explain. She took a sip of coffee to hide her tears, the warmth spreading through her even as unease lingered. Something in her gut told her the storm wasn't over. That afternoon, Michael insisted on calling the police station for updates. Sarah sat close by, trying to listen. She could only hear Michael's side of the conversation, sharp questions, long pauses, his jaw tightening more with every response. When he hung up, Sarah asked carefully, "What did they say?" Michael hesitated, then exhaled. "They haven't found him. Not a trace." Her stomach dropped. So, he could be anywhere. Michael reached for her hand, squeezing it firmly. "He won't touch you. Not as long as I'm here." Sarah nodded, but her mind whispered otherwise. Later that evening, Michael stepped out briefly to pick up groceries, refusing to let Sarah come with him after the sleepless night she'd had. She stood at the window, watching the rain ease into a drizzle. The world outside looked calm, almost peaceful. Then she froze. Across the street, behind a half-broken fence, a figure stood completely still. Watching. Her heart leapt into her throat. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision. The figure didn't move. A man, tall, with shoulders hunched. She couldn't see his face clearly in the fading light, but she felt his stare. Sarah stumbled back from the window, her breath coming fast. She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she typed Michael's number. "Pick up, please pick up," she whispered. He answered after 2 rings. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Her voice shook uncontrollably. "He's here. Michael, he's outside. Watching." Michael's voice turned sharp, urgent. "Listen to me, stay away from the windows. Lock the door. I'm 2 minutes away. Do not move." Sarah's hands shook violently as she rushed to the door, sliding the bolt into place. She backed away, clutching the phone like it was her lifeline. But when she glanced at the window again, the figure was gone. Her knees nearly buckled. "He was right there," she whispered into the phone. "Now he's gone." Michael's car screeched into the lot moments later. He ran inside, calling her name. Sarah rushed to him, nearly collapsing into his arms, trembling so hard she couldn't form words. He held her tight, his voice fierce. "I've got you. He's not getting near you." But Michael's eyes darkened as he glanced toward the window. He knew she hadn't imagined it. David was escalating. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows of the building, David smirked to himself, whispering, "Scared yet? Good. You should be." The game had just begun. The night fell heavy again, thick with the weight of unease. Michael had checked every lock twice, drawn every curtain, and made sure Sarah stayed close. Still, the silence in the apartment was fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Sarah sat curled up on the couch, her knees tucked to her chest, the blanket pulled around her shoulders. She hadn't spoken much since she'd seen the figure outside. The fear still clung to her, and no matter how tightly Michael held her hand, she couldn't shake the memory of being watched. Michael paced by the window, restless, his mind running through possibilities. If he's out there, he wants us scared. That's what this is, a game of intimidation. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Sarah's voice was small, trembling. What if it's more than that? What if he's planning something? Michael turned, kneeling in front of her. He placed his hands gently on her arms, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Then let him plan. Because whatever he tries, I'll be ready." Her eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. "You can't fight him every second, Michael. You can't protect me forever." He shook his head firmly. "I'll try. That's all that matters. The sincerity in his voice cut through her fear, if only for a moment. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest, and for the first time all day, she let herself breathe. But outside, in the shadowed edges of the complex, David moved silently. His jacket dripped rainwater as he crouched near Michael's car, his fingers tracing along the paint. He pulled something sharp from his pocket, a nail or a shard of metal, and slowly dragged it across the surface. The screech of metal on paint was swallowed by the storm. He carved one word deep into the door, mine. The next morning, Michael stepped outside early, hoping to clear his head before Sarah woke. But the sight of the word carved into his car stopped him cold. His chest tightened, his fists clenching around nothing. He stared at the message, rage simmering under his skin. "Damn it, David," he muttered under his breath. When Sarah appeared in the doorway minutes later, her hair loose, her face pale, she followed his gaze. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh no." Michael moved quickly, blocking her view with his body. "Don't look. Go back inside." But she pushed past him, staring at the word etched into the car. Her legs shook. "He's not just watching. He's marking us." Michael grabbed her hand firmly. "Which means he's close. Too close." His voice was sharp now, urgent. "Sarah, this isn't just intimidation anymore. He's testing us. Seeing how far he can go." The day dragged painfully. Michael refused to leave Sarah's side. He kept his phone charged, called the police again, and demanded patrols near the building. But every time the phone clicked off, Sarah saw the frustration in his eyes. The police couldn't guard them every second. That evening, as Sarah went to fetch water from the kitchen, she froze. Sitting neatly on the windowsill was a folded piece of paper. Her chest constricted as she reached for it with trembling fingers. Her voice broke as she called out, "Michael." He rushed over, his face pale as he took the note from her. In messy, jagged handwriting, it read, "You can lock the doors, you can hide behind him, but I'll always be closer than you think." Sarah's knees buckled, and Michael caught her before she hit the ground. Her whole body shook as she buried her face against him. Michael's heart pounded furiously, but he forced his voice steady. "He's trying to break you. That's all this is. Empty threats." But the tremor in his hands betrayed him. He didn't believe his own words. That night, Michael barely slept. He sat upright on the couch with Sarah curled against him, her breathing uneven, her hand gripping his shirt as if afraid he'd vanish if she let go. Sometime past midnight, a faint sound drifted through the apartment. Tap, tap, tap. Michael's eyes snapped open. He glanced at the window, then slowly stood, moving quietly so Sarah wouldn't wake. The tapping came again, rhythmic, deliberate. He approached the curtains, every nerve in his body on fire. With one sharp motion, he yanked the curtains open. And there he was. David stood just outside the glass, rain dripping down his face, his smile stretched wide and hollow. His hand tapped a coin against the window, steady, taunting. Michael's blood ran cold. David leaned closer, his lips moving silently. Michael didn't need to hear the words. He knew what they said. "I'm not leaving." Michael grabbed the phone, dialing the police with one hand while the other held the curtain tight shut. But when he looked again, David was gone. The rain fell harder, and the window reflected only Michael's own shaken face. Sarah stirred awake, sensing the tension. "What happened?" she whispered, rubbing her eyes. Michael sat beside her, pulling her close. His voice was quiet, almost a growl. He was here. Right at the window. Her eyes widened with terror, her hands clinging to him desperately. And Michael, for the first time, realized something chilling. This wasn't just obsession. This was war. The storm outside had grown into a roar, the rain pounding against the building like fists. Sarah sat frozen on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes wide and glassy. Michael hadn't let go of her hand since he'd seen David at the window. His grip was tight, protective, as if sheer strength could keep her safe. But both of them knew the truth. David was no longer circling from a distance. He was pressing closer, testing limits, daring them to break. The police came half an hour later, 2 officers in damp uniforms knocking on the door. Michael explained everything, How David had escaped, how he'd scratched the car, left a note, and then appeared at the window. One of the officers scribbled in his notebook while the other scanned the apartment, checking locks and windows. "We'll keep a patrol car in the area," one officer assured. "But unless he breaks in or you can prove direct threats, our hands are tied." Sarah's voice trembled. "He is threatening us. He's stalking us. Why can't you just take him away?" The officer sighed. "The system doesn't work that way. He hasn't committed an arrestable offense since the wedding. We can't hold him without cause." Michael's jaw clenched, his voice sharp. "So you'll wait until he stabs someone before doing anything?" The officers exchanged a look but said nothing. After leaving their contact number, they stepped back into the rain and drove off, the sound of their engine fading into the distance. Sarah's body sagged against the couch. "They don't understand, he's not going to stop." Michael crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Then we don't wait for them to protect us. We protect ourselves." For the rest of the night, Michael moved with determination. He reinforced the front door with a metal rod he had in storage, checked every window, even placed a chair under the back door handle. He grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and set it by the couch where Sarah was resting. Sarah watched him with wide eyes. "You've done this before." Michael paused, the bat still in his hand. For a moment, his face softened with something unspoken, memories he didn't share. "I've learned you don't take chances with people like David." Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to ask more, but the weight in his eyes told her not to. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Michael sat beside her, brushing her damp hair back gently. "You deserve to be safe. And I'll make sure you are." The storm eventually lulled Sarah into a fitful sleep, but Michael stayed awake, every sound pulling his eyes to the door. Around 3 a.m., the storm eased, leaving only the dripping of rain from the roof. He leaned forward, head in his hands, exhaustion threatening to drag him under. Then he heard it. A faint sound, metallic, near the hallway door. Michael's head snapped up, every muscle tensing. He grabbed the bat silently and moved toward the noise. The apartment was dark except for the dim glow from a streetlight outside. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. Then, slowly, another sound, scrape, scrape, like metal against metal. Someone was picking the lock. Michael's chest tightened. He turned quickly, whispering urgently to Sarah, "Wake up. Now." She stirred, confused, until she saw his face, sharp, alert, ready for a fight. Her fear snapped her fully awake. "Michael, what?" "Quiet," he mouthed, motioning her to move behind the couch. She obeyed, trembling, clutching the blanket tightly around her. The scraping stopped. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. Michael raised the bat, his grip firm, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The door creaked open an inch, then another, until a sliver of shadowy figure appeared in the crack. "Michael," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. The door swung wider. And there he was. David. His face was pale, drenched from the rain, his eyes wild but deliberate. He stepped inside slowly, silently, as if savoring the moment. In his hand gleamed a knife, bigger than the one from before. Michael's chest burned with fury. "You picked the wrong door, David." David's lips curved into a chilling smile. "No, Michael. I picked the right one. Because tonight, this ends." Sarah stifled a sob from behind the couch, her whole body shaking. David's eyes flicked toward her at the sound, his smile widening. "There she is. The little stray you think is worth throwing your life away for." He took another step forward, the knife catching the dim light. "You can't keep her safe forever." Michael stepped between them, the bat raised, his voice low and steady. "Try me." The storm outside had ended, but inside the apartment, the air crackled with the electricity of something inevitable, a confrontation years in the making. David lunged. David's sudden lunge was fast, almost animal-like, the knife flashing toward Michael's chest. But Michael had been waiting. He swung the bat with everything he had, the crack echoing through the small apartment. The impact struck David's forearm, sending the knife clattering across the floor. David staggered back, snarling in pain, but his eyes burned with fury. You think that's enough to stop me? He spat, clutching his bruised arm. Michael planted his feet firmly, the bat raised again. You're not touching her. Not now, not ever. Sarah, crouched behind the couch, trembled as the scene unfolded before her. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to run, but she couldn't leave Michael, not when he was standing between her and danger itself. David lunged again, this time with his bare hands, slamming into Michael's torso. The bat clattered away, skidding across the floor. Both men crashed into the coffee table, sending mugs and books flying. Michael grunted as David's fists rained down, wild and desperate. He grabbed David's wrists, pushing back with sheer will. You've lost control, David. You're not the man she once knew. David's eyes flared. She was mine. Everything we had, mine. And you stole her. Michael's strength wavered under David's rage, but then he saw Sarah. Her terrified eyes locked on his, silently pleading for him to hold on. That single look filled him with a surge of determination. With a roar, he twisted, slamming David onto his back. David kicked free, scrambling toward the knife on the floor. His fingers brushed the handle just as Sarah, trembling but brave, leapt forward. She grabbed the knife first, clutching it to her chest, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Stop, she cried, her voice breaking. David, please. This isn't you. David froze, panting, his chest heaving. His gaze locked on her, and for a flicker of a second, his rage softened. His face twisted with something almost human, pain, longing, regret. Sarah, he whispered. We were supposed to be forever. You promised me. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. I never promised this. I never promised to be hurt, to be trapped, to be terrified of you. She raised the knife slightly, though her grip was weak. I promised love. But love doesn't look like this. Michael stood slowly, stepping closer to her, ready to shield her again. David's breathing grew ragged, his body trembling. If I can't have you, he muttered darkly, then no one will. With a sudden burst of rage, he lunged again. Michael reacted instantly, shoving Sarah behind him. The struggle was fierce, bodies colliding, fists flying. The sound of grunts, crashes, and shouts filled the room. Then, sudden silence. Sarah's scream pierced the air. Michael! Michael stood over David, the knife in his own hand now. But David was on the floor, groaning, defeated. The blade had missed its fatal mark, lodged shallowly in his shoulder. Blood pooled quickly, but he was alive, writhing, cursing through clenched teeth. The room was chaos, overturned furniture, broken glass, blood staining the floor. Sarah rushed to Michael, clinging to him, sobbing uncontrollably. Sirens wailed in the distance. The neighbors had heard. The pounding on the door grew louder. Police! Open up! Michael dropped the knife instantly, raising his hands. Officers flooded the room, guns drawn, shouting commands. In seconds, David was restrained, handcuffed, his face twisted in hatred as he glared at Michael and Sarah. This isn't over, he hissed as they dragged him toward the door. You'll never forget me. Sarah collapsed against Michael, her whole body shaking. He wrapped his arms around her, whispering into her hair, It's over. He can't hurt you anymore. But Sarah's sobs told him the truth. The wounds David left weren't just on the surface, they were buried deep inside, scars that would take years to heal. Hours later, after statements were given and the apartment was quiet again, Sarah and Michael sat together in the dim light of dawn. Her head rested on his shoulder, her eyes swollen but calmer. Why didn't you let me run? She whispered. Why do you keep fighting for me? Michael turned his head, pressing a soft kiss to her hair. Because you're worth it. No matter what you've been through, you deserve someone to stand by you. And I'll stand by you, as long as you'll let me. Sarah closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek, not from fear this time, but from something fragile, something new. Then maybe, for the first time in years, I can start to believe that. The first rays of morning light broke through the clouds, casting the room in gold. The nightmare had ended, but the journey toward healing had only just begun. The ending left everyone speechless, not because of the violence, but because of the undeniable truth shining through the wreckage. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't won with fists or weapons, but with love that refuses to give up. And in that moment, Sarah wasn't just a homeless woman anymore. She was someone's heart, someone's reason to fight, someone who finally found safety where she least expected it.